everybody ready? Call the meeting to order. All right, silence your cell phones if you would. And everybody will please join us in the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lisa, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Darcy Kaplan,
Here.
Angela Brown. Here. Jenny Suggs.
Here.
Keith Goshen.
Here.
Jasper Christopher.
Here.
Tara Shields.
Here. I don't think it's already adopted policy. I believe the adopted policy. It is our adopted policy that Berlin Township Zoning Commission, each applicant or agenda item will be given 10 minutes or at the discretion of the chairperson to make a formal presentation. The chair will allow questions from the commission members in order to provide timely and orderly discussion of business for consideration. Finally, the audience will then be given up to 3 minutes or at the discretion of chairperson for each speaker to respond. Chairperson may limit repetitive debate, and all comments from the audience must be addressed to the chairperson. Lisa, can you verify that our meeting was advertised?
Yes, in the October 11, 2023 Delaware Gazette.
And Kathy is ill, but everybody should have had the opportunity to review our meeting minutes from October 10th. I'm wondering if anybody would like to make a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second, anybody?
Second.
Okay, Ms. Suggs.
Yes.
Mr. Christopher.
Yes.
Mr. Goshen.
Stay.
Ms. Brown.
Yes.
Ms. Kaplan.
Yes. All right. So we do have an amendment before us tonight for BCC 18-002. So it is filed by AAT Properties Limited, in care of Coughlin, PO Box 1471, Pataska, Ohio 43062. The applicant is asking for 2 deviations from the approved final development plan. And I will not read the parcel numbers, but at 5600 Corner Price Center, there are 2 of those parcel numbers. The other is at 31 Heights Road, Delaware, and that is plus or minus 3 acres. This development is approved off Center Heights Plaza. And the first amendment is requesting to shift the building in the current space 6 feet south. And the second request is to shift the parking on the west property line so that there is a 6-foot side yard per code. Present zoning is PCD. And the applicant representative here.
Yes, I'm Connie Klima. I was here when we got the final development plan approved.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and sorry to be burdening you with this, but this is the means of doing it. When we started our construction drawings, after we got our final development plan approval, we started looking at the turning radiuses at what would be the north side of the property, which is on the right side of the page, and at the rear of the building. I'm going to show you something. I think this will be easier to see. I can put 2 of them out here if you like. This will give you an idea. This is how the plan was approved. And not what we will show you there that we want to do. If you look at this area here, this is sort of a truck traffic, car traffic study and radiuses of what is needed. And the areas up here, if you see, we have a 22-foot wide, and you see the backs of the parking areas here and where cars are turning in here. That was an acceptable radius, but we started looking at the code, and we thought we could probably make it much more safer. And in your code, it says when you have a final development plan approved, you can make minor deviations before you in regard to these particular things. Changes in the location of the building and changes in the parking area. So we're only asking for 2 deviations from what you originally approved about a month ago. And to make it easy, because I'm a very visual person, need to see things like this, I'm going to show you how this works. This is the proposed plan that you have in small version, and I'll show you. As you see, it doesn't really look different from what you approved, but I'll show you how it's different on this big print. And I did a little cutout to show you. Now, if you'll notice, on this particular radius plan, there was sorry. There's 22 feet here, and there's 18 feet here. You see on the plan that we're proposing, we increase that to 28 feet by sliding the building, and to this to 22 feet, which helps that particular area. So to make it easy to understand, I'll show you. I should have been a kindergarten teacher. As it was before, this was approximately right here, not really across the curve. And all we've done is go like this. And as it was before, oops, that's really ruined my whole presentation. This was up here. I'm sorry, this was down here, leaving less feet, and now we've slid it up to 6 feet instead of down here. So basically, the parking spaces were this far down, and now we've slid them up. Now, what we're asking to do is not in violation of your code. Everything's still in code, so we don't need anything. That's why we decided it was worth coming to ask for, because we think it's a great actual change to the plan as approved. That's the only 2 revisions.
Question I have for you, you lost 2 feet of sidewalk too. This is
Yeah.
5 feet now.
Yeah,
this
and
is
that's 3 feet, correct. And that is, we checked with code, that's fine. It's wide enough for what's needed back there. Make sure that we didn't have any issues with that.
You didn't lose any square footage of the building.
No, everything's the same, like I'll do it for you. Same building, same width, same
So
everything.
that dark area is this is this.
Yeah, we went like what was like this before and slowed it down like this.
Got it.
Okay.
You lost. Yeah, you lost it too.
But we kept it, yeah, just a small area back, yeah. And we kept the same,
Landscaping here.
it was just walkway. And this 24-foot area here is still the same, so we haven't decreased our area for access.
So start with you, is any questions?
No, I mean, I'm happy that you brought that forward because obviously in part like that actually was a really tight. I like how you showed how this is like the minimum that a car would turn, but this is more the maximum. And it's really getting close to the back of these, and especially with the size of vehicles now.
They're getting bigger.
There could be some clips going on there, yeah, where,
My client,
it's easier to clip the back of the vehicle,
Yeah.
so.
and my client who will be building this, will own it for a long time. He said he would prefer to fix it now and not later.
Yes, yeah, definitely much easier to fix it up front. No, I appreciate you bringing that forward.
Sure.
Sorry, you.
The only thing is, this backside where the curbing and the walk went from 5 to 3, the main entrances are on the front. Is that more just service?
That's more service
employee
entrance, yeah.
Okay.
That's where they bring in goods.
So not really any
No,
pedestrian traffic on that wall.
no.
Any further questions?
No.
So the
Well,
first, I'm sorry.
At least maybe 20. I mean,
Do it.
The square here, I am assuming that is the dumpster.
Mhm.
So now you didn't have access to before with the driveway, right? You were short.
So we had, it was correct access there, but now it's just closer, it's 4 foot over here.
So you can, this is the dark gray area is all your driveway. So the last one, you did not have contact with the dumpster. It was the driving range, it was the orange line.
No, that's not it. That's just showing that where trucks will probably end up going in the aisleway.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you're driving, the ranges that they'll go.
And what are you doing for surface here? Sorry.
That's all asphalt, that's required.
Bummer. I had the same problem at our workplace, that we had trucks coming in and out, that just swells up like.
Yeah, it does. You have to
We had
do,
the concrete from year to year, all that area.
well, they'll go through the construction drawings and they may require that when they do construction review. That permit. Yeah, it starts looking like a wave after a while, doesn't
Yeah, the garbage trucks tear
it?
it.
Yeah.
It's just not taking
Yes. Sarah, any questions for me? Other zoning representation? So the first order of business is that we do have to make a determination whether this is considered a minor or a major fee or amendment. She shared with us what the section 11.13 does discuss, and it talks about deviations. And I'll read the section about minor deviations. These include, but are not limited to, changes in the location of buildings, structures, streets, or parking areas. Zoning commission may choose to impose conditions, safeguards, or other restrictions to carry out the intent of this district. The decision of the zoning commission shall represent final approval or denial of such deviation. You guys want to see this? It sort of enumerates what the major deviations would be. And so it's our first job to determine whether we believe this is minor or a major deviation. Did you see this? Any discussion or questions? Anybody want to make a motion, how we would like to find this?
I'll make a motion. Do you want me to read the entire amendment out?
You can go with the amendment number 1 that's before us.
Okay, so I make a motion to declare the request minor for BZC 18-002 amendment number 1, filed by AAT Properties Limited, LTD, regarding the 2 deviations from the approved final development plan, which include moving the building 6 feet and shifting it so that there's 6 feet more parking spaces.
Thank you. Anyone wish to second that?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Was that Ms. Lowe's? Who
Yes.
seconded it? Okay, Ms. Lowe's,
Yes.
Mr. Christopher,
Yes.
Mr. Goshen,
Yes.
Ms. Kaplan?
Yes. All right, so that motion passes from the minor deviation. So then our next order of business is to say whether we approve this, I guess, correct? We still have to do that. Okay. Anybody want to take a stab at that one?
All right, I'll make a motion to approve amendment number 1 for BZC 18-002 filed by AAT Properties Limited.
I'll second it.
Okay, perfect.
Guys are on this.
Mr. Christopher,
Yes.
Mr. Goshen,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Lowe's,
Yes.
Ms. Kaplan?
Yes. Right.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Brandon, thank you for catching it and bringing it before us and not wavering. I like that.
Okay, thank you.
So, and in all of the drawings, they were really helpful.
Thank you.
Your demonstration was nice.
I thought you were pulling out cards.
I know. Oh,
I'm like, oh, she has pretty cards.
Bye-bye.
Oh, you dropped your info.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. This is like our.
Steve used to work.
I was here.
Wow, I like, he always wow was gesturing.
Yeah.
It was perfect.
All right, we also have before us,
Yeah.
all right, y'all. We have before us also furthering our discussion regarding all of the changes that we're considering for the revisions of our township zoning regulation code. We have Scott Sanders here tonight. Jerry has been working very, very hard in completing the world of sticky notes. And it's a lot of work that we have ahead of us, but I think we're doing really good at it. So, Jerry, do you want to lead this discussion? How do you want to proceed? We have, so you have an idea of sort of how you've got your thoughts organized, but.
Well, I guess I can give everybody an update first on what we've done the last 2 weeks. And then try and tell you the plan as I see it going forward, but then I hope for an open discussion, if you will. At the last meeting, I asked everyone to send me their stuff. And I'm going under the assumption that if you didn't, then you didn't have anything, which is okay, because we have probably 100 sticky notes anyway. Jake's, obviously we had contributors on that. Tara's done stuff, I'm sorry, Kim's done, and we've all kind of been there. And Scott is here, thanking to give us some guidance as to we're in the right direction. And as I understand it, we have to initiate a motion, not tonight, once we have the rough draft of all of the amendments that we want to make. That would probably be the 14th of November, I'm hopeful for, that we've had a chance to review it and make all the changes to get it to the process started. Now, with that, Scott has been looking a little bit, but we have made a lot of changes already to the document. And if anybody has any more or hasn't submitted them, please do, because I update this one master working document and any attachments that Kim did knows, look, we're going to submit that to him, and he's going to come back with something for us to look at. Because there's some of it that got very confusing to read through. And then I was hoping Scott could tell us if this is the right direction, if we've done anything wrongly for the update process. And then last, I guess, we had the priorities as we discussed. Oh, we have a meeting, Jake and I have a meeting with Megan tomorrow at 4:15 to kind of give her some idea where we're at, because the trustees have to eventually approve this, and if we're headed the wrong direction, I don't want to waste anybody's time with that. So that's, after that is when Scott will get this document. With that in mind, there were 4 priorities that so far that we've gathered. 15 and 19 are the most important, because that's where most of our activities are going to be the next 6 to 12 months, as well as Old Cheshire and some changes that they'd like to do there. And I think landscaping was 3rd. And Darcy, what was the 4th one that we talked about? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to quiz you, but last night we wrote those things down.
I didn't write them down as
Oh, you-
like a priority, I have all kinds of lists.
Okay, I thought there were 4 that we did 1, 2, 3, 4.
Wait, you're right. No, I have more enumerated what the process is, I don't have what our top
Okay,
priorities are.
well, the 15 and 19, I know were high on everybody's list because of there's some ambiguities, and there's also some sections that refer to places that don't exist in it. And we found a couple of those, but in addition, there were some, I think the density we talked about at the last meeting, that it should be instead of 0.25, it was 1.25.
On the parking part, yes.
Yeah, the parking, and some of the densities for, how many, at the loading docks, it was a safety issue. We made some of those changes, but the point would be on the 14th that we as a team, mainly the commission members, would just go through it and see if they agree with those changes. And I've asked Scott if all the changes would be in red, so you can tell what was changing, and you all have the original books. So with that, Scott, do you want to say anything?
Well, sure, I mean, I'm with regional planning, and there are many, I don't know that I'm an expert at doing changes like this, but there are many people that do, and so it's kind of a small group of people that actually kind of are okay with. I don't wanna say enjoy doing it, but I like getting into it and making sure that we try to make all the changes. So, yeah, I would convert all these over into changes. I don't like using the automatic editing, if you guys have used that in Word before, because it shrinks all your text down and puts everything out on the side. I just like highlighting in red the new additions and then doing strike-throughs, anything that's being deleted. And try not to make it, I mean, sometimes I'll move something to the end of the paragraph just to make it more readable, because if you're really picking apart the paragraph, sometimes the markup version is hard to read. And you don't want to be dealing with a markup and a clean version at the same time until you're really ready to move forward to the trustees. So that's what I would do, and then if I have questions or I have editorial comments, I'll take another color and maybe type those in as well. And then come back to you at that meeting. And there may not be just one meeting to go through that text, right? Because we've done this before, a few years ago. And it just depends on, I mean, I think you guys have done a lot more homework beforehand than we did a few years ago, where I was kind of bringing the first draft and it might take a whole meeting to get through one article, but I don't see that here. Unless I get into it and think, well, there needs to be a discussion about, are you really just moving to a single development plan because you're not going to do the two-step anymore? But I understand that's kind of the direction that you're going to go, so that's fine. Just making those updates. Is that?
Have you looked through any of the suggested changes so far that we have out there? Like the one that I'm thinking a lot about is, and it's something that came up during overlay discussions, specifically for the industrial. We talked a lot about how many spots, loading spots are right versus wrong. Should we dictate that? Like, have you taken a look at any of that to see what we have there? Is there a right answer? Like, should we be dictating?
I can look something up and try to figure out if there's a standard out there, because there probably is. I mean, for any industrial building, there's probably X number of loading docks per 100,000 square feet. And somehow this just didn't get written. And I think maybe the intent was, I mean, I was involved in putting together the structure of those sections, but then somebody else did the actual design guidelines. So that was, past thought, but it wasn't, I didn't write that.
So we want to be reasonable, but
I think it was to try to avoid just a whole row of bays that face the street and just try to keep the quality higher, but I think it may have gone to the opposite extreme. Apparently that was the feedback you got from the developer, right? Not enough,
Yes.
not enough ways to get it out. So, I mean, I'm aware of some of these issues, but I haven't looked into any. I know we've talked several times about the R2, R3, R4, and we've struggled with that over the past, I think, 2 revision projects. How that got out of sequence and how that can be clarified.
because I think sometimes we know what we want to achieve. Like, I'll mention, like in the industrial and the commercial, we don't want, as you're driving down 36, 37, to see a sea of parking lots, okay? So that's easy for us to say, and we all sort of know what we need. But how do you construct that language, and how do you make that, once again, reasonable? And we took a stab at it, didn't we?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I think that was in the process where the trustees made some changes in that went away somewhere. So is that reasonable? Are there ways to construct that language? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Have other places attempted to do some of these things?
Yeah, I did it in Colorado.
Yeah, that language?
Oh, yeah.
I would bet.
So all sides of the building, there's no blank facade whatsoever. It has to be windows and
Well,
landscape.
yeah, but we're talking about the
I
parking
have
lot.
all that language. I can get it. I can ask it.
Yeah, because we don't, like I said, we don't want to see a sea of parking lots. Like when
Right.
I'm in 23 and I drive by Meijer and Home Depot, all I see is parking lots, okay?
Right.
And if we can avoid that, I think that's what we would like to do, but we don't know how to say it, and we don't know how to have it meaningful and reasonable. So,
That's what, I can contact the town meeting, see what it costs to get another.
Love that language,
Look at
is it under our purview? Is it reasonable? I mean, we did sort of try to do it when we did the bio, the BCO, but it somehow went by the wayside.
I mean, I guess there's two things. One is, that ends up happening when you allow the building to be pushed back an extreme amount. And I think isn't there language, there's a minimum setback, and then there's a maximum setback. And then another way to do it for a smaller commercial use would be, to limit the number of rows. If you could have one facing the road and one facing the building, or you could have two of those, or you just make it unlimited, and that's how you end up with the acres of parking.
So,
But I mean, developers, or not developers, but end users want every parking lot to be able to see the door. I mean, that's what they say. So when you try to argue to disperse the parking, they get nervous about.
right. Well, that I think holds true for retail, but for some of these other uses, does it really, if you're having manufacturing, for example, that shouldn't really, like,
Yeah,
I don't get
retail.
to say that, but anyway, so those are the kinds of things conceptually that I struggle with, like, we know what we want, but
You don't want to see all the I-75, just the big Amazons and data centers, they're just so blah, just prefab
Make
just
it-
going up and they don't do anything with it.
yeah, I mean, I think we've done a good job with the architectural components. Some of the people might have things we need to fix.
Yeah, where we run into some issues as well is, like, so we want it to look green, and we want to make sure that we don't have parking so much in the front, but then when we've had some developers come in, they say, well, this isn't reasonable the way that we have to lay out these buildings to make best use of the land. Like, we have to stack the buildings in a different way, and that means that now the parking lots have to come over here where you're saying they can't be, or that we have to have it look a certain way. So that's what we're trying to make sure, when you look at where we have the BIO and the BCO, and it's really within the BIO that I think it's
Yeah,
tripped us
those
up
are the
the
two areas.
most. It's the BIO that's tripped us up the most so far, I think, with just making sure that it's not that C, and do we have the way that the land, the parcels are kind of somewhat breaking out, some of them, is it possible to still have what our vision is on there? If now they're saying, well, buildings have to be rotated now, so of course you're gonna see a bunch of it. And we had a discussion around industrial. Well, there's really not gonna be anyone working there, so why would you have green space there? But it's really that feeling of having it not just be building and parking lot, but like building and asphalt. It's really having some green as well, so that it doesn't just, again, kind of look like a sea of buildings.
One of the meetings that I recall, that was like an informal, Scott, that they said how far back they had to be because of the height allowances, and that would make them motivated to have more parking up front, so they were farther away. So that's kind of a discrepancy. We want the parking behind it, but we don't want to penalize them because of the height of the building. I don't know how you compromise the two, is what I think is part of it.
Yeah,
Part of the dilemma, is it, would it be reasonable? I don't know.
You know, I think 60 foot, they said, oh, you had to be 700 feet behind, versus if it was less than that, and they had 6 buildings, I recall, and how you position those. So trying to,
You mean you gotta call a building out pushing it for
yes.
Yeah.
Might be farther away from 36, 37, they were allowed higher, like 3 stories instead of 2, and I don't even know the exact. I thought it was 60 feet was the number that I.
That was what they were shooting for. And what they ended up doing is putting like retention ponds along 36, 37, because they couldn't do parking. So they wanted the buildings back, so I think they went retention pond to kind of fill that void.
They haven't come back yet.
Yeah, they
There's
haven't
like
come
6
back.
that
buildings
was the
and a
idea.
125 kilovolt electric plant was what was presented, but they didn't do anything yet with it. Because they wouldn't tell us who their client was.
That's right.
I mean, I don't know what the client is. I'm not supposed to talk
Okay.
about it. And I don't know anything, but.
Anyway, those are sort of the things that we know that we kind of in the direction, but we don't know how to get there. And we're hopeful that if you don't know, maybe you know of another township that's had a similar, I don't know.
Well, he provided us with the Concord landscaping, and Tara has that in his.
Well, it's a good starting point.
Well, and in fact, Tara's done a great job of making it simple. So,
Well, understandable is really another thing.
and
that we all wanna
enforceable,
see.
so
Well,
that's what
enforceable.
Jake's out to say, hey,
Absolutely.
I can't read it, I can't do it.
So as you said, Jerry, we do have some priorities and we came up with 3. Does anybody else have others? Because I don't remember what the 4th one was.
Well, I know that okay, I can think of Old Cheshire, so it's OCPUD
Right,
is
NCD
something that's
slash NCD.
Slash
NCD is really truly the priority of that.
okay, yeah, I think we wrote that down too, but the NCD side of it, because it's not conflicting, but sometimes it doesn't. It was 2002 codes were in there, so verifying those, we talked about that. And then I just think in general, the whole book, the goal is to update the whole thing from the original, not original, but the last major update that was done.
Because I know, I don't know why I got so fixated on parking, but it's like I can't talk about anything else now. I've been possessed, I don't know. But once we fix certain parts of the book, like the front, then there are certain sections in the back, like there's, is it 24, deals with parking? Once we kind of fix those things, we have to go to those back sections and make sure it all matches. And I think we kind of forgot that stuff sometimes too. And we can't do that till we have changes.
Well, I tried over the last couple of weeks in my spare time, I went back and looked for R2, R3, R4 and tried to change those to match the new ones that we're trying to do. And in all cases, and the other one I think was signage, because now I do that on the weekends too, and there are some holes in it, and we've got to be careful, especially around right now with all the voting and stuff, what we're gonna, we're being a little more lenient, I think, will be coming out. But one of the trustees said, you know, it was refreshing coming here from Liberty, because all of a sudden I could tell we were all in Berlin because there were no signs. It was right before, on Liberty, I'm just saying, in the right of way.
Okay, in the right of way, yes. I was gonna
Because,
say,
yeah, there's a
let me
bunch
know
of
on
signs out, there are some legal signs out there right now. Trust me, it's some that you don't want to get to on 23.
Yeah.
So Jerry, I'm looking at my notes and I think I might know what our 4th priority point was.
Okay.
And I might be wrong, but it was identifying what Jake is running into as far as what you call pain points. What
That's
things, what obstacles are in Jake's way and how can we make your job a little more understandable and
So,
clear and reasonable?
I know with the accessory building aspect, we did get that one squared away. I wrote a little bit different language for the accessory building, so that I added in some of the things that were kind of left out, essentially. And then one of the other ones is with parking in cul-de-sacs. I know we talked about that a lot, with the safety aspect and everything for, our fire department and everything. With cul-de-sacs, I was talking with our road superintendent, Jesse, about it. And he had a resolution from September of 1996, before I was born. And
why did you
sorry,
say
guys.
that?
So the resolution was stating that parking in cul-de-sacs, and it was also talking about snow along the roads within 2 inches of snow, that there is no parking along cul-de-sacs. The section after that in the resolution also said no parking in cul-de-sacs at all times. So we're trying to work around that and see what we're capable of actually doing with the parking in cul-de-sacs and stuff. So those two have been moving a little bit better on the aspects of violations for that. And then I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. Is there any others that are popping in your head? I know we're talking about the sign stuff. That's something that's kind of in the works as well with penalty violations, etc.
Did you have anything, did you find anything on, because wasn't one of them, not just the parking in the cul-de-sacs, kind of that aspect of mulch, other things?
Right, so yeah, that aspect, we don't have anything yet. They didn't mention anything in that resolution that we're looking through. So we're still kind of going through the progressions of looking at these resolutions that have been passed in the previous years to see if there's anything that fits
I
the.
mean, parking or other obstructions.
Right, so, and Jesse had mentioned to me also that he found one, I don't know if it was in that same resolution, because I haven't seen it yet, about basketball hoops along in the cul-de-sacs as well, so, because that's one issue that I just ran into last week, so.
And they leave
There's a
it,
lot of,
or they move it back and forth.
Just leave it there.
Oh.
Yeah. So,
The only other one had to do with the tiny homes and barndominiums.
yes, thank you. So I didn't have my sheet with me, so I appreciate that. I talked with a guy by the name of Jacob, do you remember what his last name was? Bean, maybe? I think Jacob Bean or something. He was the Springfield Township Planning Director. So I reached out to the OTA. OTA put me in contact with him. I've been speaking with him about kind of tiny home stuff and barndominiums, if he's seen it in codes, because he's worked with a lot of codes and helped people get their codes kind of to fit the bill of the township and, as it grows. So he was telling me that essentially at this point in time, there's nothing really that goes into the means of barndominiums or tiny homes or anything like that. The one main thing that he said would be just being able to go with the square footage and the setbacks. So that's essentially the only thing that we'd be able to be capable of doing within the resolution if we wanted to try to add something in that. He also offered if we wanted to have him as a key resource to help us with the resolution and everything, that he would be available for that as well. So that's really the only information I got on that.
so are they treating them as accessory buildings then?
No, they are treated as a single family building.
Okay,
Which is what I had been when I was at the OTA training last year, when I was only here for like 3 days. I remember I still have the sheet that says that as well. That it's,
Okay.
they've always been treated as single family dwellings, but essentially there's nothing yet that's come to fruition for,
Is
a
that in our
conditional
resolution,
use.
that,
What's that?
that they will be treated as single family homes, so we,
So it's, I believe it's in the ORC that way, but I don't believe there's nothing in our zoning code, obviously, as of now. So if it was something that we wanted to incorporate into our zoning resolution, we could, but essentially it'd just be the square footage and the setbacks, making sure that doesn't go straight, so.
Yeah, we talked about that as we have a statewide director organization too. And we were emailing on that discussion about it one day. It's just a very unfortunate term because there's nothing condominium about it. It's just a bar, and although they'll start, when they start pitching the idea and you start asking more questions, it's just, I'm gonna do a barn and then live in it. Okay, well then it's single family. Well, yeah, I may run my business out of the other half of it. Well, and that has nothing to do with it either. That's a totally different thing.
And also a note behind that would be, we could regulate a certain percentage of living space that would have to be in that barndominium. So like a 25 to 75 being the living space of the area. I don't know about on the behalf of percentages, because that's the same question as what we're talking about with the side load garages as well, which I'll be getting the memo hopefully from the prosecutor's office this week. I just spoke with Tony this morning about it. He said that he'd be getting that memo out, so that as soon as I get it, I'll send it to all the board members as well, so that everybody has that resource, so.
Jake had mentioned the fire code in the roundabout or this cul-de-sac, thank you. This weekend, I was at the open house and actually Craig Hall, who is the lieutenant fire, he and I got talking and he said, why don't I get to see that? I said, you want to? And he talked to one of the trustees, Ken O'Brien, who is in charge of fire, and he's got permission. We're gonna get him a copy of the resolution, so it's more eyes on to this. Because his biggest comment was about driveways. And I didn't go into any detail, because there was like 100 little kids getting candy and other things, so we didn't really have time, but that's one of the other research things that we're doing as part of this update is including both the fire department and then also the ARB. I'm not sure, but they mentioned the ARB. Megan Rail asked to have them provide their input. Because a couple of things I think are missing, just, I'm not changing the subject, but just opening this up, is they have a checklist now. I think the checklist ought to be in the resolution and an explanation about it. And then there are standards set that if there are any no, this is my opinion, if there are any no's, it doesn't come to the commission. Because the whole point is that they either pass it or they don't, and the commissioner is supposed to just see it and kind of add their input as like an informal, and then the trustees see it, but it's already taken care of. They've abided by all the rules in 15 or 19. So those are suggestions that we're gonna try and put into the plan. And I think that what I see are more sections, maybe in the appendix, that we can go through quickly and make judgments on instead of having to read some of these very detailed things in like 15 minutes.
Yeah, I'm piggybacking off of the ARB aspect, with the process that it's going through currently. We talked about that last time. I'm also getting in that same memo, the response from the prosecutor's office on that process of adding that extra step for the ARB to be able to recoup back to after those changes have been made, so that then they can go back through the checklist and yes, no, whatever. So I'll be waiting on that. And Scott, I don't know if we've talked about it yet, but with the ARB process and the workflow in general for the BIO and BCO, starts off with that pre-application, which is kind of like my informal with the developer. Then it goes to the actual application submission. That application submission, as soon as I sign off on the application, everything's kosher and good to go. It then goes to the ARB. ARB goes through their checklist, looks for all the yeses and nos if all the architectural standards are good. Then it goes immediately after that to the BZC. In that middle process, before it goes to the BZC, we're hoping to see if we can add one step in there from ARB. They check over the list and everything, make sure that, whatever no's there are, that they come back with those changes to the ARB again before going to BZC. What would be your thoughts on that?
Well, I know that the whole idea was by writing the rules, well, by making the rules, as I was going through that process and kind of observing it, it was supposed to be a smoother, like a quick process. It seemed like steps kept getting added.
Right.
So that would be my only concern, was adding another, it just depends on the time frame of how quickly they're able to respond, not feel like, well, I gotta get back to them.
Right.
And I think it says may go to the RPC, and it could do that at the same time that it goes to the architectural review board, just to get our comments, because we
Gotcha.
missed, not just here, but some other overlays in the county. It's just hard to track everybody's zoning map.
Yeah.
Because we're not an automatic part of the process.
Right.
But
I like when they go to RPC before they come to ARB, mostly because a lot of those standards come into play anyhow at ARB or at BZC. Generally, we're getting the legal aspect from it, from the prosecutor's office, just to see, because the timeframe windows are 30 days between each process. So I don't know if that's even a capability for us. But on the aspect of obviously the timeframe of it, it could add an additional 30 days to that development process. So, and it would be something that I'm not sure if everybody would be in tune to add that, if it is another 30 days in between that.
So are we also asking the prosecutor's office is if it's a no, if we can stop them? Because I don't think that we do that.
So it wouldn't because.
Okay, the jury said that, but I don't.
No, on the basis of the ARB, they're
Or
not.
did I misunderstand?
Not
What I was saying was we don't want any no's.
I know that we don't want any, like, we talked about that last time, but I think it was a
And
misunderstanding.
they keep saying they're gonna fix it.
I think the developers misunderstand what the ideal is. Like, it always seems like the developers think that we can just accept no's, where our, like, the intention is that it should ideally all be S's. Like, I think we all understand that, but it seems like the developers always think that like, we're gonna just cave and, just like accept, modifications.
And maybe, right, and maybe that's something that we elaborate a little bit more on the workflow sheet, kind of expand a little bit through the steps so that maybe developers, that will be a piece of information I give to them, before the application submission, so they can look through that workflow and actually understand completely what the ARB standards are, but also like what their process is when it's coming to a review board that is not going to approve or deny. It's just a suggestion per se.
Well, I think honestly, what doesn't seem like it fits is that there's the checklist and they have no's on it, but they get to continue moving forward.
Right.
So that's what's very confusing to
And that's what I'm saying.
many
To
people
allow them
is
to
that,
make their own choice,
Yeah.
but they make dumb choices. It's like, why would they want to, even though they know
Yeah.
that they're continuing on with it now?
because they're going to be
It's very
stopped at
wise.
that end regardless.
Right.
So
So
that's,
they should
And,
be.
and
they
that's,
should be by the
that's where with
trustees.
the ARB, it's hard because it's not an approval board. So they can't approve a plan for those, even if it has no's, they can't say we deny it and it stays with the ARB. So that's where that extra step, hopefully, if we can do it, would eliminate anything of them not coming back to ARB and just going straight to BZC, and then hopefully nothing getting lost, but say there's a couple no's out there still, even though it goes to BZC, it's still going to the trustees as well.
Exactly.
So I'm hoping that's something that we're capable of doing legally. I just don't know yet, and that's hopefully what we'll find out at the end of this week with that memo that we get from the prosecutor's office as well. So
Right.
I think that's it for me.
Could we somehow educate them at some point that there's like no's are not.
Right, I think
No's are
that's,
not
right, I think that might be like the elaboration of that workflow. To be
Yeah.
able to maybe just throw more information into that section of the workflow of like ARB, just, to eliminate any of that confusion whatsoever.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's, again, the answers aren't, we don't have the answers yet. So it's hard to say if we're even gonna be able to move forward in that process and getting that clarification. But either way, clarification in that section would be nice to give to the developers as well.
Okay.
So do we all feel like we have identified the things we think need to be addressed and that we're making progress towards that? So you can have stuff that people not at least given some starting to, Jerry. I think it's kind of impressive how much stuff has been turned up and Jerry's been in the mines.
I like the research part and all the people who've contributed. And then I am running out of sticky notes and having donations. But, yeah, anything you guys have, please send them to me and I'll make sure to add them. But I think the next is on the sometime between now and the 14th of November, we hope to have everybody get a copy to review that has all the changes in it.
So we do have a hearing on the 14th, so we want to be able to, if we can, do a lot of this up front.
And that's like, getting you guys, as soon as Kathy, we get it, Kathy, let you know, you can pick them up and read them ahead of the meeting. But yeah, I knew we had something.
It's the one-
Yeah, but I don't know if that's
Cheshire.
Oh, Cheshire Mills, okay.
Do we want to hear from Tara about your landscaping? You want to give us
So
details?
exciting. Just as, I was kind of looking over our landscaping section as well as looking in a few different, other townships, like I was provided Concord Townships, which is really, 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 really hard to read. There's a lot of things in ours that don't necessarily, wording doesn't make sense, and with the help of Kim, we've kind of reorganized maybe. So that's kind of how the sheet that I gave you, we've got the general requirements, interior landscaping requirements, perimeter requirements, plan submission and approval, and then I have something else to talk about at the end, but, I pulled a lot from Concord's, as far as like design and the things that I thought were applicable to us. There is a very confusing good, better, best percentage chart, and I think it's a calculator, it must be on their website or something, somewhere you can access, as far as like their required perimeter screening or existing screening. But just, you know, as far as the design of things and the way plants and trees are put in within the internal landscaping plan as well as in the buffer zone, I had just ideas and I wanted to throw them out there and see if you guys had any, you know, extra thoughts on it. If you see any, anything in here that isn't called out. But as far as general requirements, like the earthen mounds, I noticed on there, I know it's kind of hard to see, but they just have some different, like they have 4 different types of mounds. And the same goes for like the structure of how plants are placed. And I thought that was really interesting with like this one down here, they have 2 kind of teardrop shaped mounds and they kind of cross over each other. So just, you know, thinking about like what we want to see from a design perspective, I thought what they used was really helpful. And then Jerry and I talked about when we just think about the overall landscaping for the county or for the township, we think about we have Allen Creek State Park as like a hub in our township, and what can we do to preserve current trees, if we're replacing trees or adding new trees, keeping them in like the native species. So along with the prohibited use list, there's also like we could create an overuse list or a preferred species list. So as far as like what will match our surrounding areas to kind of keep within that rural township feel. And let's see, also talking about like wildflower meadows instead of ground coverage in different areas. So that was a thought. And again, I wanted to touch on these before I redid it all, and then somebody says, no, you can't. Installation and maintenance. One thing I found from, I think it was Worthington, was they require that all their developers, and I didn't see it in here, but I could have missed it. They require all their developers to maintain the trees and landscape for a year after development. So if a straight tree dies, they have to replace it, which I thought was, you know, really good on our part, you know, and the residents' part. So I was really trying to make a happy medium between developers, residents, and, you know, what we can not be ambiguous about.
Tara, would that mean like with the 90%, when it's 90% development complete, it would be, when it passes over to the HOA, how would that work with, you know, the HOA compared to the developer?
I would say like maybe something like the HOA reporting a dead tree to the developer. But just, you know, because I mean, I'm in the landscaping business, we could come in and put in a half-dead tree and it meets the requirements of everybody. Well, that half-dead tree dies in 6 months, then the people are stuck. You know, the HOA is stuck, or the residents are stuck. So just, I felt like that's usually what we give as a year warranty. And so that would be a good, you know, basis for how the developer would have to maintain it, or, you know. And then, so under general requirements, we put things that we think are overall between all the districts. So like right of way is, landscaping in the right of way is going to be pretty similar for most of the sections. Still under questioning, but that's what we thought would be in the general requirements. Minimum requirements, so just setting a precedence, and that's kind of where we were going back to the good, better, best, is that we would be better. Because if you have a good requirement and then a better and then a best, or however they got it listed in here, you know, the developers are most likely gonna do bare minimum. So if we set our own standard, which I've got a lot of notes on how to do that, like 1.5-inch caliber trees, period. But kind of we get mixed in between the VIO, VCO, and the regular zoning resolution book with, you know, heights and calipers, and they're not, like, I could have a medium, one of the things we found was a medium-sized shrub, and, well, a medium-sized shrub could be a medium-sized shrub right now, at 3 feet high right now, but it could be 10 feet wide, 10 feet high. So just kind of, you know, at maturity, what those minimum requirements would be. And then as far as interior landscape requirements, those are kind of all within each section. They're gonna have interior requirements, but that would be going back to the tree layout. So the tree layout guidelines, so to keep them from people from planting, you know, tree space. You know, for the interior, we said, you know, you could have the groves and stands, you could have the grids, multi-layer, single file layers and rows. So just kind of providing those diagrams to developers to kind of give them an idea of what we want and like what's the best, you know, for Berlin Township. And then minimum number of trees, that's already in our, it's in 26. And it says 26D2. And PRD districts R2 and R3 are okay. It's tree planting is equal to 1/2 inch in tree trunk size for every 150 square feet in ground coverage by a single family structure. So, like what we had talked about with those interior requirements is if somebody builds a single family home, and it's happened in our neighborhood, is we have this home on a small lot, they put a big pear tree in front, it gets damaged, it breaks, you know, falls into the house. So just getting more detailed about where tree placement is within, as far as distances are concerned. And again, I have all these in notes and I can write it out as long as you guys think it's all good. But then once you get to business, community, shopping uses per lot, office, institutional, and industrial, it's referencing a subsection that doesn't exist. And then it's 1,000 feet, 1,500, and 2,000 square feet. It's 1-inch tree per each of those. And we kind of felt like business and community shopping uses per lot, you know, didn't really fall, or it's not categorized correctly. So we just want to clear everything out and put, you know, industrial, commercial, residential, mixed use, make it simple, you know, so that we're straight across the board talking. Then same thing, and we'll still include vehicular use areas like it is, somewhat like, oh, I have that twice, sorry. Service structures, tree preservation, so again, that goes back to within, you know, 6-inch caliper, I think that it's listed in here what our requirement is, but preserving existing trees. And one thing I wanted to ask, and I don't know, Scott, if you know the answer to this, can we require of a developer, if they purchase the land, say they purchase the land, they flatten the land, they've removed all these trees, can we fine them or require them to follow that? You know, like they're taking down, like if we want to talk about tree preservation, but they're already taking it down before the development plan is submitted, is that something that we can hold them accountable for?
I don't think so. I think that
They own the land.
in the city of Delaware tried to challenge somebody to do that, and the city has a lot more power than the township does, and I don't think they won. Because they tried to go back and say, well, we took pictures over the years of aerials, and obviously you took these trees down, so they tried to capture that. I mean, first you'd have to write it in the code, and then you have to try to track what trees were there, and you can't. I mean, anybody can walk by and say, well, they obviously cut down a bunch of trees.
Right.
I don't know how you scientifically then say, well, cut this one down.
When trees die, we lost hundreds of ash trees, you know, so if somebody wanted to take aerial shots and say, I destroyed my forest.
So you'd have to constantly.
Yeah,
I mean, it's very.
Also, they have 5 acre tree that just died? No.
Yes, that was my only question, is like they, and again, it's because it's near and dear to our heart, like they took down like a 100-year-old oak tree and when they leveled they took down the house and stuff, and that was before, well, he's planning on developing there, so can we, that would be in, you know, that was my only question. If
I mean,
not,
if those trees are protected under some other auspices besides our township, and I don't have any familiarity.
Even the cottonwood's gonna get taken down.
Well, I mean, it's dying. I don't, you know, I mean, they all die, but.
And we do have that in the preservation listed, like 4 different reasons why, you know, they would need to take down a tree before development, you know, it's dead and diseased, you know, over mature, those type of things. And then, you know, if they're in the right of way utilities.
So legally in the United States, you can't take out cattails. It's against the law. Putting new ones back in.
Cattails.
No,
Jake, you need to enforce this.
I guess so. I thought you said cactus. It's like- I'm like, what?
Find some of those.
I know.
Huh.
They had developers in Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point. If somebody knows they're gonna come in and develop, they would take care of any pesky things ahead of time.
Before they come, they could take everything down, then come in and do a development plan and go, there were no trees on our lot. In
When
theory,
there were, they were within their rights to cut them down. It sounds like.
well, but that makes that whole paragraph null and void. You can't even, why even have that in there? You're holding them accountable for something you can't hold them accountable for. That's all. I mean, you're saying you can't cut these down. Like, how are you saying that? As long as they do it before they come see you and bring that development plan, they could, which is what this
There's no
person did. He took
Me-
down, and I have proof, because I got pictures of what was there a month ago and what's not there, and there's multiple trees that he took down. Okay, but you're saying you can't do that. You know, per this, if you're developing this land, you have to preserve these trees. Well, as long as he does his demo and land clearing before he ever brings development plan in, you can't hold, you're saying you can't hold him accountable for that? Then that's a workaround every time. Especially if he needs to build a building the way he wants and doesn't want to make any changes to what you feel you want him to do. That's his workaround every time. He'll clear his property before ever even starts.
Well,
All he has to do is develop one time and find out you restricted him. Next time, he'll clear his lot before ever comes in here.
Because this one says existing sites, no building structure or vehicular use areas shall be constructed or expanded unless the minimum landscaping required by the provisions of this article is provided to the property to the extent of its alteration or expansion and not for the entire property of which the alternate alteration or expansion is a part of. So it's basically saying like, you know, if you want to clear a lot to expand your parking area, it's your land.
Right.
You
No,
know,
I
so
agree with her.
it's in, you know, was my only maybe legalistic
Well,
question.
this is in these, 15 and 19. All trees having a trunk of 6 inches or greater measure 24 inches from ground level shall be preserved unless other trees are exempt as follows. And it is the whole, is it too close to here, is it dying, whatever. And then preservation of wood area is encouraged that efforts be made to preserve natural vegetation areas, and et cetera. So again, you're telling him you can't, but you don't know that until he comes in. So I don't know how you stop a developer from, especially, like I said, my understanding is you have multiple developers coming in that are seeing you more than once. If he's a one-time guy, he might not know. But if he's come in here and he's gotten burnt on a development where I can't, it's messed my whole drawing up because I have to preserve all these trees, The next time he comes up, he will have a farmer's field. This is what was here. There's all farmers, there's nothing here, no trees, no wood, no nothing. People strip that land because he's not gonna want any, and it'll be worse to me to have that happen because now he's cleared everything out, not wanting to take a chance. He's gonna have to adjust to what plans you guys are gonna make him do, what trees you want him to save. So I think you will lose more trees that way because he's gonna clear everything out before he comes sees you. Because that's his out.
And for example, in Apple Valley, you have to get a permit to remove trees larger than, say it's like 2 inches or something like that. You have to get permits to do that if you're building. And if you really want to do it anyways. But they seem to really be on top of that. And so I don't know if we look at that language, and if it's, maybe the requirement's a little bit more lenient, if it's bigger than 4 inches or bigger than 5 inches, however we want to do it to preserve some of these older trees.
With the guy at the hotel said, he took thousands of trees out, just in a few weeks.
I know a lot of people, like Whispering Pines was big, they said it's pines, but there's no more pines. So,
You think about all these farm fields around here, those were all trees at one point, right? And they had to make them more long.
so that was just maybe my only legalistic question.
I wonder if there are other places that have successfully preserved those kind of trees. Because we don't have the ability, I think, to permit trees or enforce that or.
Well, from the enforcement aspect, I mean, say something's done with, we'll use that Northport Residential Hotel for example, just because I can think of that as one that's recently happened. So they take out all those trees. I noticed that. Am I sending a violation letter that they then, what's the outcome?
Right.
After that, I sent them a violation letter and
They said, yeah, we did.
do we tell them to plant more trees? I honestly, I'm not sure what.
And it's
area to go
within,
with
if it's within the developing, there's a lot of, exemptions, like I said, like trees that are within the ground coverage of proposed structures or within 12-foot perimeter of such structure.
In the driveway or something.
Yeah, and so it's not necessarily stopping a builder from taking down all the trees, but it's taking down unnecessary, and that's how it works in, in Apple Valley, which is residential, is, you have your proposed building site, your house, and then if there's any trees around it, in the yard that are existing, that are bigger then you have to just get approval, someone.
Do you know what they do if if somebody weren't to get a permit for taking down a tree that needed a
I
permit?
think they're fine.
They're fine.
And I can.
That was my only thought,
Yeah.
in the direction that from a zoning perspective, violation wise.
That's what I was saying, I don't know if we
What would
can.
happen, right.
But, and sometimes I think it goes back to the development and the rural feel and the neighbors around, they know when things are getting taken out that should, is maybe above and beyond, the building site or requiring to plant a new one in that same spot, over a certain caliber is kind of how I think it's been handled. But,
That'll control growth really well.
That's also like an HOA and a highly regulated, they have really crazy rules up there too. So.
Right.
yeah, but it was a thought,
Yeah.
we're trying to
Right.
preserve, and that
We
was
watch
why,
everything here. So.
yeah, if one is, if we needed an example.
Yeah.
That was something interesting. And then buffer between uses, and I put this under interior because they had, I was thinking about the GNR where they were gonna do the multifamily and then the industrial is speaking to the buffer zone in between and what's required of that. And I think the biggest statement, it's in here, but the biggest statement is if there's any conflict, it's the most stringent, whatever requirement there is. So the biggest kind of change and thought that I had was the perimeter requirements. So we were working on like a flow chart for adjacent properties. So you would start at the top, you would think about the type of zone you're in. So if it's residential, and then you say, what's your adjacent properties? And if there's multiple, you go with, again, the most stringent landscaping requirements. And so it would be like residential to industrial, and then, but you also have a commercial, but industrial is the most stringent. That's the flow you would follow. So that would be the landscape buffer zone around the perimeter of the property, and what the requirements are for that. And we talked about, again, this is ideas, is that in order to start adding more or preserve current trees and or landscape, that you would require the developer to do all three sides or whatever sides are not street facing, and they would all have to be developed in that same stringent way. So if they're bordering industrial on one side, they've got to do the industrial buffer zone requirement on all sides. And then the next developer that would come in on another adjacent property might have to beef it up. And like, so something would start to be established on the first property, but then the next property would have to beef it up if it required, more screening or something. And kind of the same, like when it came to like fencing and split uses, because what made me think of this is that my brother, and he's up in Delaware, but the back of his yard, he has a fence, and then his neighbor has a different type of fence, and then this neighbor has a different type of fence, so there's a split in between and they can see the difference in the fences. So just kind of by making it more uniform, hopefully it would,
So that's the objective, is uniformity.
yes.
And then we
See, we've had a rule, and I don't think this is going anywhere, but if something is adjacent to agricultural, there's a fence required, but we don't require it around the whole thing. We just-
So I have a question. So when we go through the final development stages, there's fences allowed in a home. Does the township get a copy of each development's HOA to review beforehand?
I don't think so.
Not typically. We may have a few,
I mean,
same with like deed restrictions, we
yeah,
might
so I
have a
can't
few.
I had to sign the HOA.
Gotcha, yeah, we don't, unless if we really ask for it, or
Yeah,
if they
it was
are willing
just
enough
like
to
the
provide it.
Fences are only this type.
We don't have one, and that's been a
Right,
big
well,
problem
there's a
in
whole-
our neighborhood.
Well, and
Yeah,
also
none of
with,
them.
fencing, it's not permitted, we don't permit fences. So that's mostly if an HOA allows it or does not allow it, we don't have a permitting process for it.
So right now you don't have that, but now you've got the 15 and 19 going in, and a lot of it is fencing, for separation and stuff. Do you want to leave it to the developer to decide what type? Are they gonna put a white vinyl fence in? Are they gonna put a wood fence in? Are they gonna put a chain link fence? Now, it's supposed to be screening, so I'm hoping it's not chain
Right,
link. But there's nothing in this document that I'm aware of
Has anything
about fencing
Is
at
it
all.
part of the ARB then?
No.
No,
I don't think
nothing
so,
about
yeah, not
fencing.
that I can
And it says fencing, you have to put fencing
Yeah,
in,
right.
but there's no description
No,
of fencing
there's
at
no
all.
including for pools, which I find weird.
Yeah, pools, unless the pool
Because
has
the
a
problem
lock on
with
the front.
that, with the HOAs, it's up to the HOA when you require it. So the only time it's required, or like you can choose whether you want the automatic pool cover, if you don't have, like, I
Well,
find that so weird.
It's,
Technically, it's a building permit issue.
Yeah.
So the
Well,
HOA
right, but what I
shouldn't-
find strange is that, like, I think that it was more of an issue, like, back when this used to be farmland. But now, if your HOA doesn't require it, like, our HOA doesn't require it, so like, in our neighborhood, you don't have to have a fence, and some people don't. I find that weird.
Because the pool isn't covered all the time.
No, you don't
It's not
shut your
just-
cover. If
Yeah.
you go in and go to the bathroom, you're not shutting the cover. It's
Yeah.
not safe. Like, that's so weird to me.
And two, like with the NCD and OCPUD, like when we were talking about the guy coming in wanting to put the chain link fence with the green screening, well, we don't have anything that limits what type of fencing.
The only recommendation that if somebody wants to build a fence and they give me a call, it's just be aware of your property lines, and if you put it on somebody else's property line, it'll be at the cost of that individual, or you to replace that fence or move it, or if somebody has to tap into an easement at that point in time, you would have to remove it and replace it at your own cost. That's the only
In
regulation.
HOAs, I mean, you kind of leave it up to them, like, we've got 4 or 5 different types of fences, I don't think we've got chain link, but we've got vinyl, metal, wood, et cetera. But outside the HOA, maybe monitoring it, what about the 15 and 19, you've got this whole list of things, of colors and all the standards, what trees to do, and you're just gonna let them build any fence. And even if it's a tan, plastic, vinyl fence, whatever, is that what you're looking for? Even if it's not white, because you're not really allowed to use white, it's for an accent color, you need the big white fence, but let's say they put a tan on it, it's vinyl. Is that what you guys want? You want a wood fence, it has to be stained, it starts to fall apart, like, what is your thought about that? Because that's something that's there for a while, and it's definitely a maintenance item. Becomes a maintenance item, not too long after you put them in.
I take a guess, I'd say probably didn't really get specified, because it doesn't seem to be specified anywhere else, so it just
Right.
kinda.
The only time I've heard it come to fruition where it's like really been regulated is around a trash receptacle. And when it comes to like an apartment complex or something like that, making sure that that's screened,
But all it says is screening. It doesn't even talk about that for a trash dumpster. It says, screening for service areas.
But then you
Fans,
put in
fans, fence.
warehouses, or, the storage units or whatever, then you have to put a security fence up, and that's a chain link with a probably barbed wire or something like that. So I just didn't know, I can add what I would think would be,
I mean, doesn't that belong in the ARB?
Definitely.
but the ARB
It's
still
just for
follows.
15 and 19 for right now.
Right.
That's for 15 and 19.
Oh, right.
And that's important because you're wanting a specific look up there. But with that said, is there other areas that you want to do it? I'm saying for right now, at least hit for ARB. Is that what we want to add? Something specific about fences? They have height requirements. You can add a fence on top of a 3-foot mound. So your fence only has to be either looking for, I don't know, let's say 6 foot to a 3-foot mound and a 3-foot fence. That meets your requirement, providing whatever you want. But what's that fence made of? That's the biggest thing. So I can go, we're supposed to be meeting because of the checklist update that I did, and I sent it over with just comments. Why did you do this, or why is this? So I had a bunch of questions on there as well. So we're supposed to be setting up a meeting, I think the 1st or the 8th. So I can add that to that, like what about fencing? What's everybody's thoughts? And again, we can just add a material or, this
Well,
color.
we have materials of the building, but I don't know why we wouldn't specify the materials of the.
We don't for industrial, and I find that weird, and that's one of my questions, is why are there no finishes for industrial buildings?
It's a good
It's
thought.
not.
Yeah.
But I
You've got colors, you've got, I think you've got a color for it, like you can like even have like a red accent or something on the industrial, why, I don't know, but, there's no materials, like, is it supposed to be poured concrete? A lot of them, if you have that type of building, you have poured concrete, you don't want poured concrete, even though it's stained a color, is that what you want? So that's just something that, again, that's a question on there, where's the finishes for the industrial building? So that's, again, those are questions I'm going back to the ARB board, and I think I put it in the book that Jerry's got, so.
But I still think it's important in other, not in just
Right.
the BIO, BCO, because if you have a small tractor farm, like it's agricultural farm and, or these Pyatt, houses that are single homes, but they're on their own lot, their own tract, they're not technically part of a neighborhood, they may have a deed restriction. But who's to say that they couldn't come, I'll hide, but our property on Pyatt, they had a wood fence up on just the front of the road facing, and it's an ugly wooden fence, and unfortunately, we don't have anything to fix it right now, and then there's no fencing on this side, down the driveway to the neighbor, or the fencing in the back is between us and another farmland, and there's, you know, wire fencing or whatever, chicken wire fencing. You know, so it's like, is that really what we wanna see driving down the road? You know, is a 8-foot tall fence, 7-foot tall fence, you know, or,
It says Flat Earth Society on
yes, that was it. You know, so I just think that it's not, and then same with NCD, OCPUD, you know, some of these other districts where, you know, we may want to have that requirement in there, some sort of minimum, just like the trees and landscape, there's some sort of minimum for that.
Well, if for no other reason than if you're gonna start to push it on the overlays, if you're looking for the uniformity, if you don't have it in any other zoning text, then you're gonna have, then it's gonna be uniform in one area, but then whatever everywhere else.
Scott,
That'd
do you
be
have
a
any
piece.
thoughts or how other places have addressed these kind of issues? He's looking at the sticky notes.
I was looking for something else, but. You mean fencing in general?
Well, especially for these industrial and commercial areas, is this something that they try to make uniform or regulate or?
I mean, I know just about everybody tries to regulate away from chain link fences, but I mean, in an industrial park, you're probably gonna end up with some chain link fence, but you could probably define it to be black, which is better than, you know, silver, I guess.
Or we want to rule out something instead of ruling in. I
mean, so you don't have any fencing anywhere?
Well, the fence for 15 and 19 is
It
supposed to
talks
be
about
a
fencing.
barrier. It's like part of a
It's
barrier.
part of the screening.
Yeah, it's supposed to be screening, so
No,
it can't be a
not
chain
in your
link.
general, not in your general. And I would, I mean, even Celtic Orange has a sort of fence section yet. I know the Liberty seems to argue about fences just about every year. They submit new changes to try to fix their fencing. So, I mean, it's not an easy thing to solve. I mean, there are some simple parts by saying that you can't put a fence in front of the front facing
Right.
setback of the house. I mean, there's some simple things that you can do to lessen the visual clutter impact. But then you got, you know, and the struggle with Liberty is they're like you guys. They're dealing with neighborhoods, but then they're also dealing with the person with the flag lot, and they say, well, I have chickens and I need some kind of fencing, you can't tell me that I have to do, and I can only do a stockade, but I can't do, or it has to be a certain color, and so, you know, people come out of the woodwork when you start trying to find fences. But I'm not trying to discourage you from coming up with some basic
Like, it could be just
Nothing else.
in, you know, in the BIO, BCO, these are the requirements for and again, I felt like the easiest way to simplify landscaping, and again, at the bottom, I talk about open space and multi-use paths, maybe adding that into the landscaping section if we want to, but it's just simplifying, like, okay, here's a residential and here's all the categories, because like in the landscaping, the table, in the first table, it says, any residential zone that adjoins the following, or vice versa, a mobile home park. You know, so it gets so detailed into like the mobile home park, and then residential to office, and then residential to commercial, and then commercial to industrial, and, you know, then a freeway, and then a railroad, and then a junkyard, and then a car use lot, or car sales lot, you know, so it gets so specific. But if we just have these overall categories, like here's what residential means in landscaping, and here's what qualifies as residential, it's the R1.25, R.5 mobile home parks, you know, because those are gonna be the most stringent, you know, or, you know, industrial, multi-use, and commercial, you know, and then what falls under those categories for people to be able to kind of take that flow chart. And so if we break it down like that, I think we could do, like, in residential, here's the, like, you shouldn't be putting up a, you know, 8-foot high chain link fence, you know, just as an example. I can work on that, but.
Well, and I think too, because if it's section 26, the overlays work a little different, but if it's in 26, I like the idea because, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be, I don't want to say it, but it wouldn't have to be perfect. Because there will be somebody that has, the chickens, or they'll have somebody that wants something a little different. But if the parts that are coming from 26 that go to the rest of kind of the township, you'd have that ability to evaluate it per that application. So yes, you might have guidelines and you would say, this is what we're looking for. But if someone comes in and says, well, I want to do a little different because I'm chickens, or I've got this, or I've got this use next to me and I want to treat it a little differently, you could evaluate it then and there for that application to give them that variance. But so I mean, I think you could do something at 26 where you don't have to have everything completely figured out as to every single type of variation, fence and chain link and color and everything else. Where it gets a little tougher is kind of probably more in the overlay, because the expectation is whatever you say they meet. And that's where I think the variation becomes a little bit harder, because can you come up with all those combinations that you look at?
And I think maybe like a what is allowed versus what isn't.
Yeah.
And do you want to be, I mean, as you were saying some of those things, I want to be cautious because we do have neighborhoods and we do have, existing homes. So I think there are going to be places where people are going to still want to use chain link fences. So here's an example, okay? One of our neighbors, we're all landlocked, right? We're on an individual road. One of our neighbors, the people that lived there before, the people that live there now, they had a fenced in area where they would put their dogs to be able to stay outside when they were gone. So the dogs would go between the garage and have a fenced in area, and it was an 8-foot high chain link fence. What I don't want it to be is that we then have people coming in and saying that there's zoning violations out there because someone doesn't like what their neighbor put up in their own yard. Not within a community, but
Right.
within where you have these existing landlocked, more rural
Like that.
lots. Yeah, because we have a lot of roads, like what are right in this area where something like that might be, might be a use that it's there every day. But just making sure that if it's someplace in like 26, that we don't have it be I don't want to say it. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, and I guess the fencing
wanna
that
be
it talks
cautious.
about in 26 is mainly the buffer zones and like the
Yes.
perimeter.
Yeah,
So I think having, a small yard where your dog runs on a lot is different than, like, what do they call it, the dog run?
yeah,
That's what
like
it's called.
dog run, yeah.
Is different than having your entire property, like we've talked about with the guy over at, Cheshire, with the
Yes.
Brown, he's got the chain link fence around it, it's got the
Everything.
green screening, it's around the whole building, in order to, it's obviously in order to enclose vehicles for safety, I'm sure, but at the same time, like, is that what look we want, So I think it more applies to perimeter screening than,
So as long as it's explained in that way,
Yes.
I think it's perfect. I just don't want it being that it becomes this thing where people, we're nosy neighbors, right? Start digging around, and they're like, how can I get this person fined?
yeah,
So, you know
absolutely.
what I mean, for it to be like a headache for people.
But also something like the example you used, like say then we update the code and that's not a regulated up to code use. but it's been there for, say, 5 years. Yeah, and then we're gonna have multiple situations possibly where somebody calls in saying, this fence doesn't seem to be up to code, or, it's
There before the.
looks bad or something, of that fashion, and then I don't know how we would go about trying to figure out when that fence was put in,
Well, I think it can be, because it talks about in here, it's like established versus new, and new development.
So are you talking just strictly like for new development?
New developments, yeah.
Okay.
Not like the code in general, but I just think new developments as they come in, as we're, in the VCO, VIO, what is that gonna look, what's that fencing or screening gonna look, portion of the screening gonna look like? Because if we're talking about how they can, what the buffer landscape zone looks like, and requirements for trees and, shrubs and things like that, and it does say fences, I think we need to establish what that.
Do you guys remember we had the applicants, they had a family home. They were sort of asking about, what about using it for like RV storage and boat storage? And they wanted to put a, 8-foot fence around it. Like, that's in a residential area, so we dialogued a lot about how they could screen that from the outside so that it would be palatable. Is that, like, if I have to have a chain link fence, can you say, well, make it look good?
Yeah, you have
If
to
wanna
screen
put
it
up
on the
a
other
chain
side,
link fence,
or
then you have
screen it to adjacent properties, and I think
Yeah.
that's what we were getting at with the, kind of the flow chart of adjacent properties, is like, what's the most stringent, and then you would have your buffer zone and on your property, and then the next person that comes in would either have to beef it up, or if it didn't meet the requirements. So,
I think that's one angle too, then, is
absolutely.
if you wanna put a moat with a gate, do it, but it's gotta be screened.
And then I missed this, and Jake asked about it, but the weed ordinance, that was tall grass, and, I didn't really see it in here anywhere, that I could think of.
There's
Does that fall under health though?
What's that?
Does that fall under health?
It depends.
It wasn't like a zoning call like the health for.
Right, for some
Yeah.
certain situations it can be, but also, there is one section in the code that talks about tall grass. I just can't recall exactly where it's at, because, I think it was like the first or second month that I was here, that there was violation letters out for something like that.
Because we have a lot of HOAs with no mow zones that we kind of asked for.
Right.
I mean, that's weeds.
Well, if there are no mow zones, then that would just be going back and checking on that development plan to see where that was established in the minutes, and then that's, turns into a null situation.
Yeah, but
But
establish house that has grass that's not.
Yeah, that's,
Right.
and like,
now,
or.
right, if it was like in a neighborhood or something, somebody had mowed their grass for 4 weeks or something,
The one here on Cheshire,
Well, there's a certain time where I was about to, and then they mowed it the next
Right.
day, so I was like, okay, well, and I understood the circumstance with that as well, so that was, once I learned that situation, I was like, I'm still gonna send them a courtesy letter of a violation,
That's all.
but
Yeah.
get it figured out, and they got it about it, so.
It's like this old.
So, the last thing I had was, adding open space and multi-use paths to the landscaping section. And also, I didn't put it in there, but one of the thoughts and feelings I got from Concord, and just my thoughts in general, is we're always looking for ways to make township residents happy and developers happy, and make things not look so cookie cutter almost. Because I feel like every time, developers come in, it's like they've got a retention pond, oh, they put a bench and a pergola. And so I think, higher quality, and I would say open space, because we had this discussion, like green space versus open space versus, amenities or together, that if we have higher quality open space, and I don't know exactly how this would look, can we require less, say, common area open space? So if they put in a pickleball court, that's like pretty much like an open court or basketball court or a playground. and it's kind of not considered open green space, but can we give and take on that? And then also, my thought is if a developer would either allow other township residents to use those things, that's, a more better, I guess a better way to, it's just totally off crazy world, but I was thinking about like the Glen Ross pool, and we always talk about how we want a pool. So if the developer comes in, they put a community pool in, well, for the Glen Ross residents who pay the HOA, they have a card, they get in the pool. But then if a developer could decide, or, an HOA could decide to allow Berlin Township residents with proof of residency to pay to play, basically, to go into those and use those amenities. So it doesn't have to be the pool, but that was just my crazy thought.
Good question. So with the HOA, so the Pines asked about that central green space that they have there where, I can't think of what's even there. So just
It's a
maybe a
playground.
playground. Yeah, so they asked about having a basketball court there. And no, they were asking about putting a basketball court there for them to use, but then also they were wondering if it would be able to be open to the public for people to come in and stuff. An HOA would be liable for anybody that came in and possibly got hurt or something. So they decided not to go about that. And plus, it sounded like the residents didn't want to pay the extra HOA fees that came along with having that court there. So that would be the only thing on that behalf where it would turn the HOA liable for anybody coming in. Now, legally, I don't know if that would be something that they could figure out on that behalf if they had community aspects to that, like into a development. But that's the only thing that I'm thinking of when, that was the most recent situation, I guess, that turns question into that, that whole situation. But
I just,
The problem with the pool too, didn't one developer explain like the size of the pool, you need more lifeguards, and
Right.
once the pool gets past a certain size.
I think it's 2,000 square
that's
foot.
kind of why honestly, that's why I was thinking about like the pay to play, and if you
That would be awesome.
have proof of it, because I'm just thinking about what we keep hearing from townships. And so another example was the multi-use pass, and the pass that, go along Africa or Cheshire Road, and we were thinking as Cheshire Mills was coming in, like, what if that developer puts, as part of his development plan in conjunction with the residents that are adjacent to his, and connects that path to the neighborhood down the way, but they pay for it, and so allowing, I guess, some give and take, so that if the developer is willing to pay for that, then that means that they have less open space not requirements per se, but we can consider that part of,
Yeah.
open space or green space. And same thing, like I said, with like a playground, if, again, I hear the liability, people use like Cheshire, Meadows at Cheshire, our kids go over in that neighborhood and go on the playground, and it's private. But, I'm sure there's some way, again, if it's the paying to play, entrance fee, whatever, to a basketball court or key card or whatever, that helps pay for extra insurance or something like that. But just trying to think of what we're hearing from like Parks and Trails, and, how can we get the developers involved in those wants of the residents of the township?
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea though to have that in the development aspect, because if you look at like Sycamore Trail, that the developers eventually went into bankruptcy, and one of those multi-use paths did not continue on over to Sherman Lakes. Is that right? Yeah. So like that section hasn't been finished, and the county came in to, help out with some of the essentials that they had, but they had minimal amounts of money to be able to finish that, and the multi-use path just wasn't one that was established as permanent. So that would be good, I think, to have in the development plan aspect, so that, these developers have to have that stuff implemented into that development.
I get the HOA, the liability. I know the new guy, Cheshire Mills, he was going to have an open pergola rectory or something,
Community
the shelter
space.
house or something,
Right.
that was gonna be for everybody's use.
Yes.
So how is he managing that? I feel like walking over, you know, if I feel like walking over on a Saturday and using the picnic area, have a picnic table, whatever, who's gonna stop me? But if I get hurt because something falls off and then I can sue, so, but I didn't allow you there, but then it's public. So, I mean, that's a little different than the HOA because it's individual homes are owning that HOA. But for something like the Cheshire Mills, he's willing to put that out there for people, but then how is he managing it? You know, so.
So the lawyer's talking out of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Talking out
But
of-
you know, there, I feel like there's always gotta be some, you know, Miss Attorney over here can maybe chime in, but, you know, there's gotta be some sort of language on a sign or something like, use at your own risk. You know, it's just like any other public playground or park, you know, if they consider it that way. Maybe it's something that the HOA doesn't technically manage, you know, it is again, a public area or donation to our parks and trails. You know, that we find, like I was explaining that my husband's brother runs, or he used to do the disc golf course down at Elm Creek. And they would maintain it, their little group of friends would maintain the entire course. Well, then, I think it was the Parks Department took it, or ODNR took it over or something, and it's basically trash now, and then nobody goes there. Well, they created their own new disc golf course in Sunbury, but their people maintain it, you know, and so I think, like, there's creative ways of.
What's that?
Well, HOAs, you know, that's sort of a shared space.
Mhm.
The costs are borne by the residents. But a thing like, you know, the mills here that we're talking about, you know, that's gonna be his property, and if you see what I'm saying, he's not putting that burden on any other people. That's his decision, and it's his property.
But because he builds the shelter house, I guess, going back to what Tara was saying, does he have to have, can he have less open space? Is that considered part of open space, or is that an accessory building or something now? So does he still have to have 25% open space, even though he created this
And I
shelter
would say,
house
like,
in the open space, right?
I
That's
think like
how
a
it's
basketball court is a maybe a better example of that, because that's open, you know, open area where it's not a enclosed area, you know, or something like that. So just,
We talked about the barn thing to put up on.
no, the Cheshire Mills is across the street.
I would assume honestly that, kind of like when we say, put up a shelter house on, you know, we want a shelter house to go in this park area. Can you put up a 20 by 20 pavilion? I see the shelter house barn that he's putting up, similar to that. So it is technically open space because it's community space.
Yes.
It's just-
Okay.
it's a
And that's
shelter.
right, I think defining
Yeah.
open space, green space, community space, and the requirements within.
It's really an amenity.
Exactly.
Yes, and that's
Yeah.
what, it's kind of where I wanted to separate out amenities too, because like I saw, and I think he might have had it in his application, but it was in another townships or something, like where instead of like just normal benches, you know, they built in benches within the earthen mounds, you know, or, you know, just things that are more interesting, not as cookie cutter for our, you know, our spaces. And I think that's how we can continue to maintain that rural feel of, you know.
Open space, in my definition, is there's nothing in there other than shrubs and trees, that's it. And that's what I grew up with. I mean, where I grew up in the 70s, the open space that's back there is still just land, nothing. There used to be wheat fields, it's just dirt and weeds, that's all it is.
And we had you know, the landscaping per square foot of coverage, that's kind of within that, either a buffer zone or, you know, the landscaping requirements within that. But again, ground cover versus natural wildflower field, you know, some of the more, I just want to make it more modern, you know, modern to what people seem to want these days. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to incorporate the landscaping and trails.
What about open space?
Open space is just open space, nothing
I know, but
That's
incorporating
how it's
open
been here.
space into landscaping versus the general guidelines.
more. Not a landscape. I don't know what, if it's on section, I would think.
I think you need to word it, but then reference to see landscaping and what you need.
So those are my, sorry, that was really long, but I think it really needs revamped
Well,
big
you-
time.
To your point of trying to maybe make a reduction in the required amount of open space, I mean, I think as people have come in with amenities, we've made trade-offs. So that's almost sort of happening. I'm wary of, putting it in writing, I guess, because I don't want them to come in with, pretty little gazebo and say, that's it,
But I think we can creatively do it.
My biggest objective to all this is making it enforceable. The document as we end up with this resolution.
And that's where I feel like when you give it trade-offs, you can kind of get,
Everything in there is something that we can define and say yes or no. And it isn't gonna be 100%, the more we get to that as opposed to, like you said, Darcy, the last few years, we've negotiated a lot of stuff. And we have all these divergence and
Right.
qualifiers, and this is the way to try to make it simple.
It's kind of like when pickleball came into play, like,
Yeah.
we didn't know anything about that 5 years ago, so I mean, there's probably gonna be something new and.
Now we got
What was
bocce.
it?
Yeah, now we have bocce.
We're so far behind Florida.
Oh,
Right.
hibachi? So that's what you eat. Hibachi is what you go to eat.
Okay.
Hibachi ball.
Machi?
Yeah, hibachi is, hibachi girl.
Okay. Any other stuff here?
no, I just didn't know if there's anything else that you thought
I mean, I think it sounds like a worthy goal. I don't know, with that. How much work would that be to?
Observation is that, I mean, I think you could put something general that says, reductions in open space may be allowed if amenities are proposed. But it's funny, most of the projects, and I noticed this, the open space is never,
It's almost
they're never
always,
worried about, they're always giving more open space.
well, because it allows them, I think, to
It's, yeah,
compress.
it's the density of the lot size.
Right. I mean, it seems like mostly we have 35% open space there. I don't see many developers clamoring
Yeah,
for
one
less
that had
open
golf
space.
course.
But I do think there's probably some value in putting some language, probably in the PRD, not back in the general development, because I think everybody's gonna be looking in the PRD section when they, and maybe the planned commercial as well, but you're not gonna get the kind of amenities that you will in the subdivision.
But that's, and that, why I had it, the flow chart, and again, we can do the same thing for the perimeter requirements, we could do the same thing for open space as a flow chart from, like, here's what you're surrounded by, and this is, what open space requirements should be and things like that, but.
And that's closer to what the trustees were looking for as far as changing it, landscaping.
Yeah, those tables are, I mean, I was just jotting some other changes to the tables, because there's a lot of things that can be collapsed,
Collapsed and, yeah.
and a lot of repetition that can be simplified, so.
All worthy goals. Thank you.
That's a long and winding road.
Wow. Okay, so,
I guess the statement that we talked about today is that, like, we really have to be looking at this, like, this is what we want for our township.
yeah.
End of story. And so if it's gonna take, time to rewrite and reword, and I'll take all the time, it takes. I just wanna make sure that, we're all on the same page in that.
We've got the appetite for that. I hear you.
I think getting something written up is gonna be really beneficial to
Really.
see how everything flows and what it's gonna look like with those revisions as well. I like all the ideas. I think they all go really well with the plans, so.
Do you feel like this formatting, because like the way it's written now, it's basically kind of mixed up. All these sections are flip-flopped around.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's a good formatting?
Yeah, just adapt to the
Put it back around.
sections.
Yeah, I don't know about what's expected by the 14th, but I know that section there, 15 and 19, and mind you, I was redoing the checklist too, but that's probably a week's worth. I've been working a lot. I mean, I don't work, so that's what I was doing. So I was getting ready to have Kathy get me the rest of the book so I can start looking at it. And I haven't even started, and I just know a lot of it's kind of the same, so it won't be too bad. But I know with that, because it was so new and so different, that it took a tremendous amount of time and reading like every word. Does this make sense?
You know, I can tell you that none of the other ones are 45 pages long.
Yeah, right.
Most of the sections are
Oh,
5 to
right,
10
they're 4 or 5.
pages.
That's why I said I don't see it taking, like, that took so much because there's so much detail to it. And like I said, I was trying to do the
Never
checklist as
been
well.
revised yet, so you're the first person to really tackle it. These others have been revised a lot of times, not always for the better, okay? But they've had some tweaks. So you're really, you're plowing in there, and there's a lot.
I'll give you some more documents if you read them.
I don't mind.
It's not in the town. My job that I have to do.
Contracts, I can do. I have a few things that everybody's like done. I just have a few things based on your comments earlier. I was taking some notes. Going back to your parking situation with especially some of your industrial type things or your bigger buildings such as, somebody come in and put a Meijer in or something, and you, of course, you have to have parking because I think they have too much parking. I mean, who park clear out the street, right? I mean, clear out 36, 37, there's parking almost to 36, 37, right? But with your industrial and stuff, is there a way to control who goes in there? I mean, you have your use codes, but your use codes for industrial is wide. I mean, as far as like the type. So if you stick to, we were looking at some of them, if you stick to a guy that does drywall business or something, he's gonna have a shipment of drywall coming in, you know, he's gonna have shipments of drywall going out. If he even brings it to his warehouse, he may load them in and then, or he may take it right to the job site, who knows? But he may have a small office in the front, a handful of employees, so he's not gonna need parking, right? But if you do somebody that has a lot of traffic as far as customers and this sort of thing, you're gonna need that parking. So if you manage it like as industrial, is it up to you to decide what use codes goes in industrial for that area up there, let's say specifically? Because if it does, do you get rid of use codes that has that huge amount of parking between the building and the road? But you can't put everybody in the back if they have, you can put your employee parking in the back, you know, but then your dock may have to go in the back, and that's a whole other thing, is the number of loading docks. I looked at Meijer today, and they said the average Meijer store was anywhere from 120 to 200,000 square feet. And I looked at this Meijer, and by what I could tell, it looked like it had at least 6 dock spaces because they have so much stuff going in. Other places you have stuff coming in, if it's distribution, you have stuff coming in and you have stuff going out. I mean, if you look at Kroger distribution, there's probably 100 dock doors up there, and that was just the side I saw. You know, it's a tremendous amount, and then you have all the space, asphalt for this tractor trailer, but they're, you know, half mile off 36, 37, so does anybody really care? But I just didn't know if you could adjust the use codes to say, we don't want that type of environment up there. We don't want a, you know, 150 yard parking lot or whatever in front. So we make a use code that it's this type of business where they're not gonna have, you know, 1,000 customers a day or something like that. So that's just a thought on that. You don't have to answer. I just want to throw that out. Is it use codes changed not to allow those type of business? Because you have a ton, and there's a ton of them that wouldn't have that type of need for that parking.
The use codes were scrubbed.
Do what?
The use codes were actually scrubbed very thoroughly, many times. And the intention was to allow it to stay loose enough and only get rid of the things that were more harmful to the environment and the community, so that way businesses, a larger array of businesses could come in, that we could get the business up there. So it would allow, like I said, a larger percent of the business that was out there to potentially come in, except for the things that we really wanted to keep out of the township.
Well, you
So-
eliminated all your distribution. Any type of distribution is
Exactly.
not gonna be
Yes.
there because you have the loading dock I think one,
But even
Three doors for
those uses aren't
300,000.
in.
what?
I know like the warehousing, because that was
Yeah.
one of the things,
We don't have it in there.
like the.
There'll be warehouse
Right.
down there.
So, and again, I can't remember the use case, but I don't know if there was a couple that oversaw and go, well, that would have a better parking lot, so.
Yeah.
Just a thought about the parking lot.
Yeah, I don't think we were considering parking so much when we selected, and that was quite the process to, down and get, just got really.
And if there's
Consensus.
maybe additional parking, more than what you would prefer, do you beef up the number of islands that have to have trees in them, and you beef up the number of trees along 36, 37, that, maybe it hides more of it. So maybe like the front of the building, like the very front, you have kind of an open, people can see there's actually business back there, but maybe to the left or right of what would be the entrance, it's more beefy, so you can't see all the parking. So it hides a little bit more. So is that where we do it, is we beef up, if you actually had to have that much parking or more than what you would prefer, you beef up the landscaping, you add more trees in the islands, you add more islands, landscape islands versus, just around the parking, you have some landscape islands with trees of some size or shrubs that can kind of not make it just this wall. Again, it could be still a concrete building, depending on what we decide is gonna happen. But again, just thoughts, nothing has to be decided. I was trying to think of ways that with the parking, how can you either reduce it or hide it more? And maybe, again, beefing up landscaping for ones that maybe have parking lots. So,
That's a good idea. We talked about the parking that you see visibly from 36, 37 is, like you
Right.
said.
yeah, because Myers got one tree.
Right, yeah.
There's nothing,
Clearly a parking lot.
But there's a requirement of how large the building is, of how many bathrooms have to be in it, how many parking lots, how many parking spaces have to be in there.
I remember that we
By
have a
square
bathroom
footage.
regulation. That's probably
Yeah.
one.
Building code.
And the square footage determines
Right,
parking.
okay.
Because you don't know, it could be a warehouse today,
Right.
5 years from now, it could be an
Really
indoor
is
soccer
that.
field.
Right, exactly.
And then they need all that parking.
Well, then they may not take that building because it wasn't that type of design.
Right, they can change, right, it sells from one to the next.
The other thing I wanted to know as far as who comes up with the standards. So we have the loading standard on dock door for every 100,000 square feet, no more than 3 and so forth. And then there's lighting. There's been this big back and forth about lumens. And one of the developers came in and said, we can't find 1,500 lumens, da, 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 da.
Right.
There's a ton involved with kicking lighting out, and it's not just lumens, it's foot candles, it's color, this sort of thing. So I didn't know does anybody ever get with like a lighting designer and really talk, hey, what is our expectation around a commercial office building? What should really be looking at for a industrial building? Because I know that one thing drives me crazy is warm and cool lights mixed together. If half this room was warm and cool, it's so distracting. So you allow these guys to, oh yes, 3,000 lumens, whatever we end up on, but they've got, one type of light on the building and another type in the parking lot. So you got warm on the building and big bright white LED in the parking lot, where you can kind of maybe control that and have them the same warm color.
There's a really, really good lighting company in Denver. It's eye lighting, and they do parking lots, they do buildings, I tell you, those guys are geniuses.
And I've dealt with it, and I had a hiccup happen in my project, which is why it's a sensitive subject to me, is they didn't put the right lights in, and we couldn't get them. It was our hotel and conference center, and it's the restaurant, and we use it for weddings. It was just the restaurant, it would have been a problem, but we had these beautiful drum lights in there, and they went to dim them, and you could only dim them so far. They couldn't get them down, and even at the lowest dim, it was still too bright for the evening wedding, dancing, da 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 da. So there's so much more involved. Even though I had this information, it still got messed up. huge problem. So with this, there's experts on all this type of stuff, loading and lighting and all this stuff. Where does this information come from? So, and do we reach out to a lighting expert company to help us figure out what we really want this to be? Because 3,000 lumens doesn't really say a whole lot, so.
That's where I think standards will come in from overall, like going back in, if it's not, if we want to get that corrected, it would be going back to the STAR and pulling
Yeah,
standards
we
from.
would need some
Because
experts.
this is a new era for you guys as far as, mostly you've been dealing with housing, right? Mostly houses and a little bit of, stuff, but this whole complex up here is gonna be huge
So,
and
yeah,
have a
bring back
huge
to
impact on
Scott.
lighting and stuff.
That I think, Scott, you would probably be the right person to go back to, right? And see what other areas are doing for their commercial and industrial areas and pulling what their,
Well, is it what we want? 'Cause
well, but
we've all
seeing
seen
what that
some-
is first,
Yeah.
and, yeah,
Or do we consult with like a lighting expert?
yeah. What do you?
Yeah, you're talking to Tara now for the landscaping and not just, hey, we've got somebody doing this. I just didn't know for some of these things such as, I now know with the loading dock, why you stop there, because like,
Because
where'd
there has
you
been,
come up with
there
this
have been
number?
developers that have complained about the
Yeah.
lighting in this.
Yes.
It really isn't practical.
As long as I've been involved, I've never seen us go out to a specialist in lighting with that. Or even some of the sections we look in here for, what is the corporate guidelines for things like that. The zoning commission has never done that before. I don't know if the trustees have hired consultants, and I don't know if the regional planning has done things like that. It's more the developer coming in and pitching what they have, and we see if it fits.
Well,
But I think if we're gonna specify it,
But,
either we
I mean,
don't
it's so hard to
specify it or we
specify.
do.
Again, it's a minimum, it's a minimum.
A minimum, again, just saying, all lighting needs to be the same warmth, or something like
Well, I
that.
know that the
At least
trustees
put that in
already
there.
approved changing from 1,500 to 3,000 because of the discrepancies that were done.
There you go.
recently.
But where did 15 come from? So where did that come from all set up?
I think the consultants who helped write this book came up with those numbers.
Yeah, because you have to, 15 and 19, a lot of like the NACS codes, it was a lot of like overall community involvement. But then when it got more into the design standards, those were really created kind of more during COVID. So you didn't have as much community, it was more the consultants.
Yes.
Because it's 1,500 and they're saying there's no such thing. I went out looking and I was trying to do it when I didn't really have time, so I just kind of put it, and I didn't find it right away. I don't know if I just didn't have enough time, keep looking, or if there really wasn't a 1,500 living down light.
Down light is about
Whatever we have.
30 feet high.
So it's like, but there's more to it. Just because you want 3,000 lumens, what's the foot candle you want in the parking lot? Just because your light is 3,000 lumens, the number of lights you put in that parking lot then helps control the foot candles of what's actually, how bright you want it. I know with Nationwide, we had our standards, it was one for parking lots was 1 foot candle. In our offices, it was at floor height, or desk height. It needed to be 45, 50 foot candles at our desktop, right? So it didn't matter that these were T8 lights or T5 lights, it still had to be this at our desktop. So just because you have 3,000 lumens, how many pole lights are you gonna have to put in to get? So they put in 3,000 lumens and they put in 5 pole lights.
But,
When
and I
it's
think,
too dark.
and I think some of that gets into like, when you start to talk about the specifications, we don't really do building code. do we?
No.
No,
So,
we don't.
so when you talk about like the lighting in a parking lot, that is building code. So we would never specify what that needs to be.
So you think it's building code?
Specified in there.
But we might have a specification as to what the light, like the 3, it's in there.
Downlight.
That it's downlight, it's this high.
Type of light.
Yeah, the type of light, but we wouldn't necessarily, and there's some, I think some things around what it is at the borders. Like how
On the
they,
property, yeah, they
The
can't,
property
they can't
edges.
lead into.
Yeah, that drops down.
but that interior is usually more building code type of thing, which we don't really get into, so.
Just to move forward, I'll commit to finding some more information out.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, you're already wrote, thank you.
Everybody was talking about tiny houses, but what about ADUs? Is anybody, like, if I have, let's say I have an acre, I don't. But let's say I have an acre and I need my mother-in-law to move in, so I build a tiny house, but not really, it's not its own, it's,
Well, there
Yeah,
is.
there's a gray
is
slide.
that what you guys are calling it?
It's in FR1.
Okay, that's fine, and you guys have something on that, okay. And then, going back to the no, and I know people are concerned, if we on the ARB board say no, Jake is going, and Jerry too, have them go back and fix it and bring it back to us again, and the question is, well, is that gonna take up too much time? My question to you is, if it's a no, and we don't make them go back and revisit with us, but let's say they go back and fix it, they may or may not fix 100%, but they fix it, and they go straight to you, and you end up with no still, you saw original one, you checking it, and you see that they fixed 2 of the 5 no's, are you guys gonna say yes? Because if you do, then, okay, he can get away with stuff, but if you're gonna say no, he's gonna have to push it back anyway and come and see you guys again.
That's
It's
what
just-
I was,
That's
that's what I
not
was
the way it
saying.
works.
Okay, so what,
That's what I was saying, is that it doesn't, there's a disconnect. Because regardless of what someone
Even if we all say no.
sees, they still move forward.
even to you,
Even to us.
And it goes away, it goes
Pass
back to
us.
the board.
Yeah, even if we all say no,
They
It still goes
still
forward.
move
they
still
still
go out
goes
to
to
the
the trustees.
In the
And that's
minutes,
the
it will
biggest
say
one.
that we had comments, but we don't change it.
and you guys don't.
It's like the hotel thing.
I would
It's
vote
got
no if they
vote,
were
but it's
missing
gonna-
something, I would vote no, but they would still go ahead.
They still move
They
forward
could.
regardless.
They could fix it and then come back to you, or they could keep going.
No, they don't come back to us regardless.
They never come back to
No,
us,
never.
they just keep going.
The
It's like a
confusion,
train.
yeah, and I think a lot of the confusion right now is, even if there's no, they keep moving. But I think some developers think that just because they keep moving, that they're gonna get approved. But when they get to the trustees look at it and go, well, you've got a no, here, a no, here, a no, here, a no, here, a no, here. Our answer is no.
Okay.
I mean, they
So
should know.
That's
that
what
they-
Jake is going back
Yeah.
and talking to the prosecutor about.
Okay, because I know some, like the one guy, like the lady who just came in today, she revised her drawing,
Which was.
That's
great,
but that's
but you didn't
different.
have
but
to.
that she didn't have to. Oh,
We would have never
okay,
seen it.
okay. So just
Because
because we say
she was
no,
obviously getting the fact that
Yeah, she was being.
And that was a different process, she didn't come through the ARB.
okay, right, I'm just saying in general, if somebody comes in and they don't pass, you go, I don't care, I'm
Well,
going
no,
to.
the ARB is complete, that whole process, if we're a no, then they don't move forward if they're on the standard process.
You guys are no.
If
If
we
on
are,
a regular
we say
process,
no.
if you're no, nobody moves forward. But on-
Exactly.
On the 15 and 19, if you guys say no, it doesn't matter, they just keep.
Exactly.
Oh, so that's a, okay.
But the ones we've had come through, we kind of given them that, like, look, if you keep moving forward and the answers are all no, you kind of should understand you already know your answer, the next step.
Are you
So
saying
if
on
they
the-
say no up there, or the
That's not true.
15 and 19, if they say no up there,
Who's
are
that?
they just
No,
done,
no.
the developer, so the developer comes in, and you guys told them no, and they keep moving forward. If they
The
tell them
trustees,
no,
if the
The
trustees
trustees
say
are the
no,
final
it's a
say.
no.
I'm sorry,
The
what?
trustees, yeah, the
But
trustees
they-
say no, it's a no.
Right, but then do they get to start the process all over again if they feel like redoing
they
it?
had to refile.
Yeah.
Okay, so they would have to start all over again. But with you, on the stuff that's not 15 and 19, you say no, then they would have to go back and redo it if they want to do it. Okay, so you're the stopping point for the regular stuff, and
No.
ARB.
Yeah, we're a recommendation board. only.
No, not the regular process, not legal way. Regular zoning process.
Right, you recommend no to the trustees, they can go ahead and approve.
Yeah.
It is, um,
Not,
They did-
if we don't approve it, if we say no, they're still gonna move on, what am I?
They-
am I
yeah, they-
tired right
they-
now?
still have the right to go before
Yeah,
the
They
trustees.
can
absolutely.
still go.
It's not stopped here, it goes
Yeah,
forward.
we're a recommendation board. And for example, I can go back to TNR Properties. We all unanimously said no.
But that's it.
she's not talking about.
I'm not talking about the overlay.
Oh,
I'm like, I'm not that tired right now. I'm not that tired right now. Kim is mixing the two,
So
together in the same
Say
conversation.
Cheshire Mills.
Cheshire Mills, if we say no, It is a no.
Because that's in the cloud.
This,
That's in the Cheshire
Oh,
cloud.
Cheshire, okay, so,
And
see, Mount Meadows,
okay,
Mount
Mount
Meadows,
Meadows.
development, regular,
If we say
Residential
no,
development.
it's a no.
No, it still goes to the trustees.
Yeah, it's a recommendation.
It still goes to the trustees.
They can go through.
We can either approve or deny, you can either approve or deny it, and then they go to the trustees.
Correct,
And
And they can
at that
approve or
point,
deny.
they make the decision. We
correct.
don't turn down any application. We can't.
we ask if
We
they
can
want to,
recommend,
Right.
if they want to table it, revise, come back.
trustees are the final say, all of
We
them.
can
Or if they're
still-
like a-
Yeah, but we still say no.
We
Oh, yeah.
deny it, we say, and we give them the reasons why, but the trustees can overturn the residential hotel.
Right.
That, we said 3 to 2.
But the residential hotel was in the cloud. I'm not
No,
talking
no,
about
it
the,
was not.
I'm not talking about the
It
cloud.
was 6.9 acres, it wasn't considered a cloud when we did it. It was just,
It was,
That's
actually.
what it was.
It is.
Metro was in the
It's-
overlay.
It's the CR10 MU Common Res.
The confusing thing maybe is the TNR multifamily was a rezone, because they didn't want it to be overlay. The TNR industrial was the overlay.
The other was not in the overlay. They did not request the overlay.
So a normal zoning, so we have to have this in two separate conversations, because they're two completely different things, right? The business part, which is what you've been helping us on, right, with the ARB, that, there's a checklist. If ARB says you have no's on here, it still moves forward. We say there's still no's, it still moves forward. And the trustees are the final. And if they say, they can ignore everything we've said, which wouldn't happen, they would say no. Those people have to start the process all over again. If we go to something like, okay, Cheshire Mills, or the one that was on the other side, or Mount Meadows.
No, but think about
Modern.
residential.
I'm ignoring because that's all screwy, because it's part of the cloud.
No, Teton residential was not part of the
It
cloud.
wasn't.
They filed that as a normal residential,
It's a normal step.
they wanted an R4. That was R4. That was not in the
We
cloud.
haven't had people moving past us if they've been no's to.
That went to the trustees though.
Yeah.
That went to the trustees and that was a no on that.
Oh, okay, but no one else has gone to the trustees.
If they choose to,
They can do it.
If they choose to, I guess here's the difference. No one else has chosen to. They've actually waited to get approval.
You know, like that one guy.
Well, if you want to go back 20 years, there are plenty.
Okay.
We've said no.
So the past 4 years,
They
the past 4 years, we haven't had people, we have not had developers just say,
That could do, yeah.
I'm going to.
Well, I think it's because normally they table it to come back.
They normally.
Yes, we table
it.
it. We always table it. They
We,
fix it.
we ask
Once
them
we
if,
approve,
we ask them if they want to vote or if they want to table it.
yes.
Most of the time, they're
And they
tabling
always table
it,
it.
changing, and coming back.
Yes, so
But it does not
DNR,
mean that
technically.
they can't.
they can't, but they
Continue
just
forward.
don't.
I think that one developer did, he never came back, he just went straight to
to Delaware, and he went.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's possible. What I'm saying though
Not-
is
not
that
the
the
hotel, but it's
normal
a-
process
the,
is
home,
they wait to get approved here.
the hotel thing.
In a perfect world, yes. I mean.
The normal process over the past 4 years, is they wait and got approved.
So with that said, Jake, I don't have candidates to really, if
We
we
can't
want
stop
to, they could.
They want to.
No, and they could still pursue, yes. But it's not like the checklist where they're like, okay, we're not gonna back to you now, we're just gonna.
It's not.
So it is more seen as they're going to work with us until they finish.
And sometimes they don't want to work with us, they go to the trustees and make some changes, and sometimes the trustees don't, necessarily have the same priorities we do. So. It's a mixed bag.
Yeah,
I've seen all do that. Okay, so we need to get going, it's late.
yes.
So I think hopefully I want to have consensus that everybody agrees. We've got still some language to work on. Jerry is kind of acting as our point person. Thank you. Scott's got some research. You guys have volunteered for more abuse. Thank you. But hopefully we will arrive here on the 14th, everybody having reviewed everything that's available. And that's not saying it's perfect, but would we like to be able to perhaps, in a perfect world, once again, vote to push things forward after that meeting on the 14th, via Jerry and Scott,
Yes.
and not absolving ourselves of any further work, but getting her moved along.
There's a lot.
I don't think we
still-
can, I don't think we can get it done by the 14th.
I don't think I'd say.
Next year, though.
Okay. Well,
I got a real job.
Yeah. Well, what I mean is they want to, I'm not
yeah, we won't be able to look at it too.
denying your abilities at all. I just don't think you'll have time to look at what you're gonna restructure,
Yeah,
knowing how those work.
yeah,
I think that the 14th,
But
the
they don't
chair
all have
will
to be
take a
the
while.
same time.
I
If
wouldn't,
you're gonna rush it through, you
It
can
is.
do it on the 14th. but-
I wouldn't assume we're gonna have any time to review that on the 14th.
I want everybody to have a red line copy of what is there now that you have versus what we're shooting for as far as all the changes, because there's a substantial amount that has been done already. But landscaping as well as the OCPUD and
Yeah.
LCD, I don't know that everything's gonna be done in 14.
Okay, we don't wanna rush them, is what we're saying, to the 14th, because that means, like we've been saying, that needs to be right. So,
Yeah,
we wanna
I think
make sure
15
that
and
that's
19
not.
need to be revised before any more developers come in and try and use the code that's written, is what I've seen so far.
But if we even revise that, I mean, aren't the trustees waiting for it all to be in it, like, ready?
I'll find out tomorrow what they're willing to do, because I don't think we can get it all done in one revision anyway. The whole
Probably not.
33 chapters all inclusive.
And that's fine, but it sounded like, from what was originally stated, it was that they were waiting, maybe that's just a misunderstanding, but they wanted all of it in one. So if we can send it through in several pieces, then that's okay. but
That's what we're gonna talk about.
what the expectation is.
I'm not sure. No, they wanted it all done by the end of the year, the whole book.
Yeah.
So, we'll see what they, what's most important.
Give it a
to them.
try.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for the input and the time.
It's a lot. And Scott, thank you for donating
Thank you.
part of your
You
evening.
what?
Thank you later.
You see the bill?
No, early.
All right, okay, so we have Jake left us. Do we have any other information or issues that people want to discuss?
I just wanted to know if the other positions have been posted yet.
They had a meeting last night, and I guess I should mention this. You're here officially now.
Oh.
Yeah, that is my understanding. That got done last night, so.
Sorry, guys.
I asked Jerry to push that forward tomorrow. I want to say that I thought they said yes, but do you know if they posted our second alternate?
Yeah, it's out on the website, but
Okay.
the alternate position is there. I don't, no one's told me if there's anybody applied to that. You're gonna take an alternate?
Yeah. Over here.
Instead of the prop.
Oh my gosh,
I
okay.
don't know, you know,
I'm gonna
they're,
talk to Kathy about that.
well, the seventh body hasn't been chosen.
Fine, one here. All
Yeah,
right,
I'm
so,
never-
just we'll make a motion to adjourn. Everybody available to that? Thank you, everybody, who did this hard work.
Sign vote?
Second.
Second.
Okay, I guess if the motion passes,
Aye.
anybody not going to adjourn, up or one out?
You don't get a vote for that.
I object.
No, it's like, you didn't get to.
Oh, okay. She's gonna work.
It's not.
I'm out of here for my next one.
I just wanna make sure.
And
this
Adopted.
I know, it's a good
Yeah,
one.
right, you're right, they-
That's the thing, it's like the NA systems are, there's 2022, they don't use.
But that's where the old book and the overlays don't have the two codes because they got really different tops.
Yeah, it doesn't.
That is.
Yeah, I can get there, I just want to make sure.
It's not even there, so we need to go back. I'm
Hey,
taking
Mama.
consequences we get it. We're having such a-
So, definitely hoping we drink more. I refuse to buy a stand. It is, this is ridiculous to me. I've ordered nine. No, it actually, so because there's everything, it actually is. And I bought a 64 ounce stand.
Oh my
Last year at Costco, before they were like 15, and it was like their vintage, like old one, and it was $30.
It was how big? How many was it?
Where do you put it?
Where do you put it at home? though?
Oh,
Like,
we
I
put it on
always-
cabinet. Yeah,
We have too many copies.
yeah.
I have a big one that's
It's
got a handle.
like, yeah, and it was, I mean, it is the vintage Stanley, like, it's green, like it's hunter green,
It's
it's
so
got
big.
yellow, red, and I think blue and red. Anyway, but it's beautiful, and so when Ellie told me she wanted a 40 ounce Stanley or a 30 ounce Stanley, and it was like $35, $45, I'm like, no.
I know you have other stuff.
So I bought this for myself, because it is nicely vintage.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah.
10 ounce. I was scared that it was 10 ounce. And mostly it's robots and other kids' patterns because it's kid size.
Yeah.
Mine was 12.
That's funny.
But yeah, I remember being at an orange meeting where we took a session with Tony with egg robots. I was like, bring that one.